Hi, and welcome back to the Miami Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Omar DeWin, Communications Executive here at Cervera Real Estate. Joining me in the studio today is a very special guest, the Managing Director and Founder of RockerFuel, Jeff Ransdell. Jeff, thanks for coming.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, very excited to have you here. Today, we're having a conversation all about tech and the booming sector that is Miami. So, Jeff, why don't you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your background? I think there's no one better than to lead us through this conversation than yourself.
Sure. Well, interestingly enough, I started off as an entrepreneur when I was very young. My first company that I started, I was 14. By the time I was 22, I had started and sold 3 companies. And the interesting thing there was back in the early days, let's call it late 90s, Merrill Lynch as a financial institution used to have a very large family office representing some of the wealthiest families around the world. And as we all know, because we're in the ultra high net worth business, the things that keep the ultra high net worth up at night, I think one of the biggest things is, did we make life just too easy on our children? Did they not skin their knees enough? Did they not suffer enough? Did they not have to hustle? And so back in those days, what Merrill Lynch was doing was sitting down with that second and third generation, trying to find out what their interests were. And then they would go out and find businesses that were interesting to that second and third generation. And I was just at the right place at the right time, and 2 of my companies were purchased by those families. And the CEO of the organization at that particular time took a liking to me, and I started my career. It was a 21-year career at Merrill Lynch, many different jobs. It was my first job was actually a junior analyst during the dot-com days. That's kind of where my interest in the creative economy started, way back in 1995, believe it or not. I did many different things, managing ultra-high net worth individuals' money, family offices, went into leadership. My last job, which I retired from in 2016, I was one of 6 that ran the firm. My responsibility was the state of Florida, the state of Alabama, state of Georgia, all of Latin America, and the Caribbean. So I'm a student of industry life cycle, and it became very obvious to me, I would say, actually starting as far back as 1999, that the world was changing significantly, that information was going to be democratized because of technology, and that the financial services world was going to go through a major shift. And I felt like I was at this point in my life and my point in my career where if I was going to unplug from the matrix, if you will, and go into the real world, it was now. And I looked at Miami. I was living in Miami. I moved to Miami in 2001 to take over Latin America and absolutely fell in love with the city. I always tell people I would rather be homeless and live in Miami than live anywhere else in the world. Absolutely love this city. And so when I made the decision to leave Merrill Lynch, the natural bridge was to stay into financial services. I understand ultra high net worth and family offices and what they're needing. And I think we're at this, I know that we're in this point of the life cycle where the wealthy are looking for boutique offerings, things that are difficult to get access to. The whole notion of abundance and scarcity, right? The larger firms really kind of focus on abundance, things that you and I can actually acquire through our iPhones and don't have to pay anybody, don't have to talk to anybody. If you and I want to buy Uber right now, we could literally do it on our iPhones while we're talking, and it would be executed. And that's abundant, right? And so the financial services world, as it sits, at least in the last 8 to 10 years, is changing significantly. And I think that ultra high net worth are looking for these boutique offerings, and they want access to the creative economy so they can get returns that they're not getting in these the more traditional markets.
And so are you saying that these boutique offerings, you're seeing more and more of these in Miami, or am I interpreting that correctly?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, even, if you look at, a big part of Miami is Latin America. And what do our Latin American investors come to Miami for? Boutique offerings in real estate, largely, right? Boutique offerings in our hospitality world. And I think right now they're also, I know factually, because we have a $225 million fund, and of that fund, about 40% of it is offshore, investors from Latin America that are wanting to come to the United States and gain access to the technology sector, but do it in a more pragmatic way. And I think that's really what RockerFuel brings to the table. I come from the public markets where there's a tremendous amount of scrutiny. And, I came to this particular asset class and said, we can bring, a more pragmatic approach. We can mitigate risk more like the public markets. We can bring more scrutiny to the asset class and lower the risk categories. And investors, that's what they're looking for.
And excellent. So we talk about the ultra high net worth coming, turning their attention to Miami. I think it's a very timely conversation because a week or so ago, in the 2019 Miami report that was released by ISG World, they pointed out Knight Frank just reported Miami jumped to number 5 in the world, number 1 in the U.S. for the most attractive markets for ultra high net worth individuals, which was, surprising and not necessarily surprising, but it was a great, leap and jump, and we're excited to see that. So I guess going back to what you're saying and tying into the tech sector, it goes one step further when you look at investment. I think that there's, as you talk about here, there's amazing tech and finance opportunities and companies, people that are turning to Miami as a sort of hub of the future. Can you talk to me a little bit about some of the actual companies and sort of tech sector innovations that we're seeing homegrown here in Miami?
There's actually a lot. Just to go through a list, you have Bolt Mobility right now, which is a really super interesting company that actually came out of Silicon Valley.
Wow.
So I think it's just proof source again to what we're talking about. This is the founder of Bolt is actually considered to be one of the top 50 venture capitalists in the world. And he made a decision to leave Silicon Valley. He spent 9 months studying the United States and where he was going to move to, and bring this notion of micromobility. And after 9 months of research, he picked Miami because he felt Miami was the up and coming tech opportunity in the United States. So that's a big statement for us, right?
Absolutely.
So he moved here. He started Bolt. His first location for Bolt was Fort Lauderdale. It was kind of a test pilot to see, if their iteration in the scooter micromobility play would be attractive to the end consumer. And they did a lot of things that I think are super interesting. Most scooters are, like a skateboard type standing, which creates a tremendous amount of risk from if you hit a bump or whatever.
Right.
So one of the things that they did, I think that's really, really interesting is they now have an athletic stance. Right, so if you get on a Bolt, you're standing side by side in an athletic stance, which lowers the risk categories of the scooter market, which is one of the biggest things that people like to pick at.
Right. Well, and are those new? Because I recently was riding them, and it was still the skateboard.
Well, you're on the wrong scooter. You got to be riding a Bolt. You got to ride the yellow ones.
Oh,
yeah.
I thought Bolt was the white and black one.
No.
Okay.
Bolt is the yellow one, and.
Oh, that's
Usain
Bird.
Bolt.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, but we like Bolt, not
yes,
Bird here.
That's exactly right.
Okay, look out for that one.
Yeah.
But so if you've been sleeping the last couple months, you may not have noticed the plethora of scooters around downtown Miami. Now they're a lot of fun, and they're also, as we were talking about off air, they're great on the environment, right?
Yeah, listen. All of the studies that we, for our firm, mobility is a major investment theme that we're leaning into. And if you look at all the studies, by the year 2030, which is not that far out, the car ownership is expected to be down 80%. At the exact same time, there is expected to be an 8 billion person migration to the major cities around the world. I call that the urban stampede.
Wow.
So when you start to think about that, a massive migration of people moving into the urban centers around the world, people just saying, my car's sitting around 80% of the time doing nothing. I got to pay for insurance. I got to pay, interest on the loan. I got to put gas in it. I got to pay to park it. It's really not a very smart investment, and more and more people are starting to realize that. So the whole notion of mobility is a massive theme that we believe is going to, from an investment perspective, pay massive dividends. You look at Uber and all these other things. I've been on CNBC now 3 times in the last 60 days talking about Uber, and you have all these people that are second guessing it. And I just sit back and just think, God, you really just don't understand the data. Because if you understood the data, you'd be buying as much of it as you possibly could right now. But to your point on the environment, I also think it's a really big deal. And I know that there's a huge debate, right? Is there really climate problems? I live in Miami. You live in Miami.
Yep.
You and I both know there's climate issues, right? I mean, I keep my boat at Dinner Key and Coconut Grove. I've had it down there for almost 10 years, and I'm going to tell you right now, the water levels are actually, they're rising.
Sure.
At high tide, my swim platform is level with the cement docks that were put in there in the 60s.
Wow.
It's a serious issue. So with mobility and removing emissions, we can be a part of slowing this thing down, or hopefully eradicating it, which is, I think, what we all have to be able to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that the more that we as a community, as we were talking about, sort of mentally get behind these solutions or alternatives or just ways to sort of slow down, as you mentioned, the issue, the better, right?
Yeah, again, you roll into life cycles. I kind of call it this rinse and repeat mentality, right? It's the human condition. We're habitual creatures. We get up in the morning, we did whatever you did this morning to get ready for work, you did the exact same thing yesterday. Yep. I know that.
Yep.
Your day, for the most part, is going to look pretty much like it did yesterday. You're going to go home tonight, and you're going to pretty much do exactly what you did last night. We don't stop, I believe, we don't stop long enough to kind of take a look at what's really going on. The world has completely changed in the last 4 years. And this kind of goes to my investment themes, right? I came to your office this morning in an Uber. Now, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do that, right? But do you own Uber? Well, now you have the ability to own it in the public markets. But up until a month ago, you had to know someone who knew someone who knew someone to get access to it, right? You look at Amazon. The majority of us purchase everything through Amazon. It shows up at like Christmas 2 days later.
Right.
Now it's changed and you can actually have it tomorrow. But do you own Amazon? Right? I can go on and on and on and on. The majority of the things that we face off with on a daily basis have completely changed from what it was 4 years ago. But when you sit down with investors and you ask them what their portfolios look like, it looks exactly like it did 20 years ago. And that makes absolutely no sense. So that, I think, kind of rolls into everything else that's going on in the world right now. We have to stop and kind of take a breather and say, what has changed? Well, climate has changed. It is warmer. The seas are rising. But what are we doing to be a part of the solution? You and I were mentioning this when we were offline a few minutes ago, but it doesn't matter what documentary is talking about climate change or scientific reports. Miami is in that report. It's in that documentary as a city that someday could be underwater. Well, to me, if Miamians came together and locked arms and said, well, what can we do to be the poster city for the world on how to slow this down? And that could then roll off to other coastal cities around the world. But it's going to take us, this notion and this understanding that we can't just keep rolling through every single day, because a day turns into a week turns into a month, and before you know it's 10 years down the road and we're swimming to your office.
Right. So get out of that rinse and repeat mentality. And I think that that's an important message. And from our end, I think our position is definitely that it's an issue that needs to be addressed. There are experts out there looking into it. It's a global issue, right? Not just a Miami issue. A lot of major cities across the world that have to turn their attention to this, but it can be done, and we should do it as long as we snap our minds out of it. And in the meantime, if you want to live by the water, there's no better place to live by the water than Miami, right? Because
Exactly.
natural disasters occur anywhere, and that's something that's just a part of life. But ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Miami Real Estate Podcast. Once again, we're here with Jeff Ransdell, the managing director and founder of RockerFuel, major VC fund down here, and part of the wave of tech innovation that's happening in Miami. So, Jeff, when we talk about tech and real estate colliding trends, one of the things I heard recently, it kind of like builds on the Uber conversation, sort of where trends are going. when we had our corporate summit a few months back, Bernardo Forbrescia, the architect, the founder of Arquitectonica, was there. Was talking about how now the buildings are being designed where the parking garages, essentially, the bottom 5-7 floors and whatever, 50-story building, are being designed in a way where in 5, 10, 15 years, they can be easily converted or retrofitted into commercial space. I guess already looking advanced in the trends that you're talking about with where we're going with cars.
Well, I think that's brilliant. First of all, I haven't heard of that, but that's brilliance in understanding how life cycles shift, and this is a group that is saying, look, in 5 years or by the year 2030, if car ownership drops by 80%, what in the world are we going to do with all these parking spots? So I'd love to hear things like that, because that's exactly how we all need to be thinking. But the whole collision, with technology and real estate, you asked me earlier, but another amazing company that's actually was created and being built and executing and scaling in Miami is a company called Mobilize.
Okay.
And
Tell us about them.
Mobilize is the virtual world, and you think about sensors. So, for example, Winwood just signed a contract with Mobilize to sensitize all of Winwood. And so now, we've met with the police department, we've met with the mayor, and what that means is now, the city will be able to sit behind television screens.
Okay.
And let's say, for example, on the corner of 2nd Avenue and 21st, you have a bar there, right? Mm-hmm. And on a Friday night, let's say that there is 10,000 people there. Well, you'll actually know that there are 10,000 people on that corner at any particular time, because the sensors are doing the head count. We know how many men are there. We know how many women are there. We know their age groups. We know if they're happy. We know if they're sad. We know if they're pissed off. And, we know what their moods are. And so that information will be fed in real life time to the police station, and the police station will be able to say, hey, we've got a mass of people on this particular corner. None of them are happy. We should probably send out.
It may or may not turn into a riot.
It may or may, but we can be proactive about it and send people to that particular corner. The city will be able to market online to the end consumer. So if it's Friday night and you're sitting with your wife and you say, hey, let's go out and have dinner. But we want to be where the action is. What's scaling right now, socially speaking? Through social media, et cetera, you'll actually be able to go to the Winwood website, and you'll be able to see, Q, for example,
sure,
is scaling
Great
right
restaurant.
now. There's a tremendous amount of people that are there right now, and so you say, okay, well, let's go there. Or maybe you think to yourself, well, that's way too many people. I don't want to go there. Let's go somewhere a little bit more quiet. You'll be able to figure all that information out.
Wow. I mean, that's just mind-blowing right there. So tell me, I think it's great. Is it consumer sort of oriented, or is it mainly for police use? Or I guess you mentioned like we as individuals can find out what's hot at the moment, right, in terms of restaurants. But
well, let's break it down then to the business owners, okay?
Uh-huh.
Because again, it's sensors, and so that data is the new oil, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's worth more than oil today. So
I like that.
We'll be able to let's say that you own a retail clothing store in Winwood. Mm-hmm. We'll actually be able to give you information on how many people have walked by your window, mm-hmm. what age groups they are, men, women, etc. We'll be able to tell you how many people stopped and actually looked in your window, and how long they stood there looking in your window. And when they were looking in your window, were they happy? Were they sad? Were they upset?
Or confused.
Yeah. So that is information that people... just think about that for a second. Now, if I can give you that information and you're a business owner and you know that on any given Saturday, 2,000 people walk by your store and none of them stop, you might want to spend a little bit of time working on your marketing for your windows.
Right. So, Jeff, the tech sounds amazing. What do you say to those that might be a little bit apprehensive about the data or the abilities?
Well, I think that that's one of the interesting things about technology, right? It's new. There are things that we don't know. We spend a lot of time watching fictional TV. And the issue with Mobilize, I think from the concern perspective is it facial recognition? In other words, if you walk by that store, do they actually know it's you? And then, drop your name into a database, and then every time you walk by, they know who you are.
Alexa's hitting me with ads.
Exactly. And I agree. I think that would be a little bit concerning. And the fact of the matter is that was a strategic decision by the founder, Rodolfo, to stay away from facial recognition. And it's just facial detection. Thank you very much. So it's
all happy, sad.
Exactly. Male, female, young, old, and that's what they're looking for. The technology was actually built for billboard industry, which is a very sleepy, exciting vertical, but an extremely lucrative vertical. It's a $9 billion vertical.
You mean like billboards, like
billboards,
like billboards or whatnot?
Billboards, digital billboards. You go into, we actually are doing a pilot right now with the Miami airport.
Oh, cool.
Right? So they want to understand who are the people, not who the people are, but what is walking through their doors.
Sure.
What are the age groups? What are the demographics, et cetera? But again, take it to the next level. Imagine you and I walking down a corridor. There's a JC billboard. It senses that it's you and I walking toward the billboard. Now, in the old days, it was like fishing with a net, right? You had no idea what you were fishing for. But now with Mobilize technology in that billboard, it sees two men. You're in a suit and a tie, so maybe it's going to throw up an advertisement for, Hugo Boss or Armani or whatever it might be, because it sees us and how we're walking. There's no reason to throw up an advertisement for Coach Purses when it's you and I coming, right? But if it was your wife and you were walking down, maybe it throws up those two different types of advertisements, because the billboard went from being non-intelligent to extremely intelligent.
Well, and that's amazing from a marketing perspective, just the ability to target and be more, specific. Instead of a fish and a net, you're more like a sniper to a certain extent.
That's exactly right.
And I think that's historically been one of the issues with that sort of out of home, where you just really aren't
That's exactly
sure.
Right.
Right.
That's exactly right.
That's amazing. So that's Mobilize. How far along in the process is it with Winwood and whatnot?
Well, we're actually working with the city of Winwood right now to adopt, their technology base with our technology. But I think we'll be up and running, relatively soon, and it's a very exciting thing for us, because it'll be our first municipal client, and just start to imagine, if things go well here, it'll probably scale up pretty big. But we're in 62 different countries with this technology. So when I say that this is a company that is really, really doing amazing things, and it's a Miami-based technology.
Yeah, it's with global legs.
Massive global legs.
When they talk about Silicon Valley and Silicon Beach and whatnot, I think these are the perfect examples of sort of what the city is doing to sort of break ground in this industry.
Yeah, I think that things are starting to move very nicely. Again, life cycles, right? The reason I chose Miami is because I felt that Silicon Valley had kind of gone through its life cycle. When you go to Silicon Valley and you were able to raise $1.5 million in friends and family, and you go there to start your business, and that $1.5 million is gone in 3 months just because of the cost structure of Silicon Valley now, it just doesn't make sense. And with the democratization of information, why in the world do you need to be in Silicon Valley? You can be anywhere in the world. You can start your company in Kenya as long as you have an ecosystem that you can tap into, that give you the consulting, to give you the dev work, to be able to help you scale and get to your product market fit. And that's what we have tried to create here in Miami, an idea to exit ecosystem for founders all over the world to access. It's working, it's happening, we're scaling, and I think more and more companies and more founders and more entrepreneurs are coming here to build their companies.
Absolutely. And so for our realtors out there, we talk a lot about the tech sector being one of the booming sort of industry pillars of Miami, making it a global city. For your clients that are either interested in being part of that tech sector, these are perfect examples on how we're moving forward, right? And also for, generally speaking, how Miami as a city is evolving. I mean, these are important, amazing facts. So, Jeff, tell me how about you have some other exciting projects in the pipeline, TaxFile, Stereo. Tell me about some other stuff.
Well, TaxFile is a really interesting company. Again, born and raised here in Miami. The founders are extremely strong founders. One of the founding partners, Richard, was a CPA for PricewaterhouseCoopers. Michael was an attorney, and these guys came together and said that the tax world needs to be disrupted. Right? It's not efficient, and basically what they did is they Uberized taxation. So you can actually go on your app right now from the B2C. You can pull up on your phone. You can get your taxes done. I mean, I was literally this year doing my taxes while I was sitting in a meeting, because I would just take a look at my phone and I'm having a conversation with my CPA. Who, we've uploaded all my information into a secure location. He's asking me questions. I'm answering the questions while I'm in the meeting. And he and I never spoke on the phone. I mean, I used to pay, over $3,000 a year to do my taxes. I pay $300 and something this year to get my taxes done.
So this TaxFile is basically an app that does your taxes?
It's an app that democratized CPAs around the United States. It's one of the largest CPA firms in the United States now, and they don't actually employ one CPA. So basically, if you think about it, right, a CPA, during tax season is working 70, 80 hours a week. This allows a CPA to augment their income by utilizing the TaxFile app. No different than Uber, right? Uber doesn't employ any of these drivers.
Gotcha.
They just democratized the automobiles, allowing people who own automobiles to make a little bit of extra money, or in some cases make a living. It's the exact same thing for CPAs. That's the B2C side. The B2B side, the business-to-business side, is where I think that the founders were super smart. About 2 years ago, they pivoted and said, look, these financial institutions around the world, these large institutions, probably didn't keep pace with technology the way that they should. So large financial institutions around the world, you might be utilizing them as a consumer, but it's actually TaxFile that's doing all the work.
Interesting.
It's super interesting.
So it's a white labeling.
It's a white labeling. It's an incredible business. TaxFile will become, I am pretty sure, the first B round that has ever been done in Miami.
Wow.
So again, you start to think about how technology is starting to evolve in the city. 2 years ago, I don't think we even had an A round. My firm alone last year funded four different A rounds just in Miami companies. Invested over $20 million in startup companies here in Miami, and TaxFile will be the first B round.
So for our listeners that aren't as savvy in investment and IPO sort of speak, could you break down A round and B round for us?
And I apologize for that, because you're right.
It's all right. You get
so
going.
When a company is being built and created, there's a number of, again, life cycles. So you have what's called pre-seed. That's usually like friends and family who are giving that company or those founders money to get started. And then the company starts to scale. It figures out what its product market fit is. It starts to create consumers, and it needs more funds. It needs more fuel to go to the next level. And so that usually is your seed round. That's outside money. That's people who have been attracted to your company, attracted to what it is you're trying to do, and are willing to give you funds, capital in the private market. Okay, from that it goes to an A round, which is a milestone. If for a startup company to get to an A round, it is very, very difficult. And when that company gets to the A round, you kind of know that they've kind of figured it out, and they're really ready to scale. We actually wrote a white paper on the path to the A round, which is I'll send to you. You might find it interesting.
Yeah, we can put it in the links to the show notes.
Yeah, we'll do that. And then from the A round, you get to the B round. The B round is, again, a significant milestone, because it basically means you've made it. And now what's happening is major corporations are now starting to look at you as an acquisition. So going back to my public life, one of the things that I came to understand was in 1999, corporate America started to pull back in research and development. I actually wrote a white paper about it. fast forward and pointing inward, I was completely wrong at the time. I was kind of scathing corporate America because corporate America was pulling back in research and development at a time when I felt technology was going to kick in and you needed to put more money into research and development. At the end of the day, what corporate America said was no. Information is democratized. Inventors and creators around the world are going to have more availability to create companies than ever before, and those individuals are closest to the end consumer, so therefore they're going to know what those new companies need to look like and what those new companies need to have in order to be attracted to those end consumers. We'll stockpile cash, and we will never allow that startup company to disrupt us. So the whole notion of disruption has actually been disrupted because corporate America has their eyes out there at all times. They understand where the gaps in their strategic plans are. And when they find that creator, that founder who has created a company, let's call it TextFile, we're not going to let TextFile disrupt us. We have more cash than we have ever had in the history of the United States economy on corporate balance sheets. We'll just go and buy it.
Right.
So I say that because when a company gets to the B round, that's actually when you start to see corporate America's eyes saying, okay, how can this organization, how can this company fit into our larger scope? Let's buy it.
Right.
And that's what I'm in the business of.
I like it. I love it. And that's TaxFile, Miami Beach-based company?
Coral Gables, actually.
Coral Gables. Okay.
Yep.
Shout out to Coral Gables. Go to the B round. I like it.
Exactly.
Jeff, this is amazing. Thank you for everything you're doing and for getting the word out about our tech sector. Once again, you're listening to the Miami Real Estate Podcast. We're here with Jeff Ransdell, Managing Director and Founder of RockerFuel, one of the best and brightest VC funds down here in Miami. So, anything else on the horizon that we want to touch on?
I think just because I think it's an interesting segue into real estate. So, the president this put together a tax-focused reform. Okay, and in that tax reform is something called opportunity zones. So about a couple of months ago, the Secretary of Commerce, Wilbur Ross, actually came down and spent a full day with our organization because he knows that this Tax Reform Act of Opportunity Zones is one of the biggest cities that Opportunity Zones exist is in Miami, right? So you start to if you understand what the Opportunity Zone tax credit is, let's just say, for example, 2 weeks ago, Uber went public. And let's say that you were lucky enough to have invested in Uber in the private markets. And now it goes public, and now you've got $100 million worth of capital gains that you've got to deal with. Now, if you take that $100 million and you come to Miami and you invest it into a project that is zoned for the Opportunity Zone, you can defer that $100 million.
Wow.
So you start to think about real estate and tech and how they come together. Again, it's about locking arms. And how do we find the landowners that actually occupy these opportunity zones and talk to them about how do we create an opportunity for these technologists to come to Miami, defer their taxes, and maybe even bring their companies with them. So there's a gentleman by the name of Moishe Mana.
Yep, of course.
Moishe is in the process of this vision of creating a 5G city. So he has purchased something like 80% of Flagler Street in downtown. He's got 50 acres that he's purchased in Winwood, and this is what he's focused on doing: is creating a community. He knows the demographics. He understands that people are moving to the urban city, and Flagler, going back to the history of Miami, that was our mainstay. That's where business came and went. And so his first purchase was the Flagler Station. And if you're familiar with the F Station in Paris, which is a building that is 100% focused on technology, and it has the biggest technology companies from around the world that are there, and he wants to turn that in, instead of the F Station, it'll be the H Station for Hindley Flagler. And he's aligned himself with my firm, and we'll kind of be the heart and soul of the technology engine for the H Station. And he wants to create that whole ecosystem west to east on the Flagler Station into technology, fashion, art, places where people can come and live in a very cost-effective way. And, then you leave your house, you take a scooter or you walk to your work. If you're in fashion, you're in the fashion house. If you're in music, you're in the music hall. If you're in technology, you're in the H station. And again, he's one of the largest landowners of opportunity zones in Miami. And so I think it's that combination of people who are in real estate and development, and how do you align yourself with firms like ours, and let's lock arms and really make this thing happen.
I like it. Let's do it. Let's take a quick break from our sponsors, and then we'll keep chatting here with Jeff Ransdell from RockerFuel. We'll be back. And we're back. Just as a reminder to our listeners, you can find us on the Apple Store, Miami Real Estate Podcast. We're also on Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, and MiamiRealEstatePodcast.com. So, Jeff, let's keep talking about tech, all about tech here. It's amazing stuff. We're getting into Mana Commons with Moshi Mana. Tell us a little bit more about what that sort of is evolving to, or what we can expect once that's completed.
Well, the man has put together an amazing real estate portfolio of $2 billion worth of real estate that he's acquired here in Miami around this focus. So what we should expect as Miamians is, between now 18 months out will probably be the first project that is up and running, which will be the H Station on Flagler Street. He's got a number of other projects, 155, 177, which is across from the H Station, which right now is kind of like a food hall. If you're familiar with Flagler, it's in desperate need of iteration.
Yeah.
The plans are absolutely amazing. But yeah, 18 months to 24 months, you'll see some major things. He's also doing some pretty big projects in Winwood. So, he owns, like I said, 50 acres there, but he owns about 4 acres right there on 2nd Avenue. And so right now what they're looking to do is kind of an extension of what is now Winwood Walls.
Okay.
He's big into art. He owns a 2 million square foot art installation in New Jersey, which is the largest in the world.
Wow.
So he's a big art focused guy. So he wants to have walls that actually can slide out and bring artists in, restaurants. He's looking to partner up with some major hotel brands right now and bring some really cool hotels into Winwood. Again, really all focused around building all this stuff out. But I think at the end of the day, his vision is super interesting. That it's not sustainable to go out on a Friday and Saturday night and spend $300 to $400 to $500 on dinner. It would be better to be able to go to your community. Let's say you live in Flagler. You live, you work, and you play in your community on Flagler Street. And he wants to create, affordable living where you then are a part of that zip code community. And if you're a part of that zip code, if you live in that zip code, then you're getting major discounts at the microbreweries, at the restaurants, at the clothing stores. Anything that's in your zip code, you are a part of. In fact, he's gone so far as to try to create a model where at the end of the year, everyone who is a business in Flagler would take a percentage of their earnings that goes to a pool. And then if you live in that zip code, you participate in that pool at the end of the year. So you're actually an owner of the community that you're living and working in.
This has got to be a new concept, right? What do they call that?
Well, it's his vision, right? I mean, this what is there? He's one of 5,000 in the world. And I think when you become, that wealthy, you can become very, creative. And I also think you get to a point in your life, and I know Moshe very well. He's a very dear friend of mine. I think he's at that point in his life cycle where it's, how do you want to be remembered?
Sure.
And I think he's very, thankful for the things that he has, and he's really big on giving back. And I think this is his give back.
Right.
And I don't think it's about making billions of more dollars for himself as it is to create something that will withstand, long after he's gone.
That footprint, right?
Yeah.
And what a footprint to leave.
Exactly.
Right? It sounds amazing.
Yeah.
So we're looking forward to that. And I guess looking out into the future, let's say as much as we can with our metaphorical crystal ball here, what does Miami's tech scene and tech sector look like, to you in the next 5-10 years?
I think in 5 years, it's if we execute on what I want to do, we will look like the Austin, Texas, look like the Boulder, Colorados, but I think much larger. I mean, again, I'm biased. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else in the world, but I don't know. If you have to make a decision, I'm going to go to Austin, Texas, or I'm going to go to Boulder, Colorado, or I can go to Miami. I think you choose Miami 7 days a week and 4 or 5 times on Sunday. So to me, we got you're in real estate, location, location, location,
right.
location. Well, if we don't have the location, I don't know who the hell does. Mm-hmm. And so it's I think what this is going to take though is making people aware. Again, it's that rinse and repeat. Mm-hmm. Making people aware that we have this opportunity to create this. And what that does for our city is exponential. People say that real estate in Miami is high right now. Well, let me tell you something. In 5 years, if we turn this into a tech city, so when people think about Miami, they think about our nightclubs. They think about our hotels and our resorts. They think about our food and wine. They think about our real estate. But nowhere in that conversation ever up to right now does someone talk about our tech ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And if we can create and plug and bolt on that fourth piece, Miami changes exponentially. Because just look at what happened in San Francisco. 15 years ago, San Francisco, you could own pretty much anything you want, and outside of your door was probably not such great scenery, mm-hmm. right? Maybe there's a tremendous amount of homeless people, et cetera, et cetera. But look at it today. And that's all because of technology.
Thanks for listening. Once again, this was Jeff Ransdell, Managing Director and founder of RockerFuel on the Miami Real Estate Podcast, your go-to source for expert insight on all things Miami real estate. Find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, where else? Podbean, MiamiRealEstatePodcast.com. From Miami, where the future is always bright. We'll see you next Tuesday, and thanks for listening.